Hey everyone, Economic Ninja here. I hope you're doing well. We're going to talk today about what is a business cycle. Why do you need to know it? Well, when you understand the build up, the boom of a business cycle, and then the consequential, the expected or inevitable crash, it's really important to know that because you can start to identify the different parts of it and how it plays into the greater economy and how you can position yourself to make a lot of money. So, business cycles, they're a type of fluctuation found in aggregate economic activity of a nation. A cycle that consists of expansions occurring at about the same time in many economic activities, followed by similarly general contractions. This sequence of change is recurrent but not periodic. The business cycle is also called the economic cycle. So let's talk about how do we understand it and how can we put this to work for our own benefit. Well, in essence, business cycles are marked by the alternation of the phases of expansion and contraction in aggregate economic activity and the co-movement among economic variables in each phase of the cycle. Aggregate economic activity is represented by not only real GDP, a measure of aggregate output, but also the aggregate measures of industrial production, employment, income, and sales, which are the key coincident economic indicators used for the official determination of the US business cycle peak and trough dates. Now, some popular misconceptions are that the contractionary phase is a recession and that 2 consecutive quarters of decline in real GDP means a recession. Because if you've looked at our president lately or watched him, he just changed the complete definition, saying, "Oh, it's no longer two quarters of decline in real GDP. It's more than that." And he just changes the definition. But it's important to note that recession occurs during contractions, but are not always the entire contractionatory phase. Also, consecutive declines in real GDP are one of the indicators used by the NBER, but it's not the definition the organization uses to determine recessionary periods. Again, the NBER is an organization that is tasked with the job of declaring an actual beginning and an end of a recession. No joke. So there's a little bit of manipulation there. And the sad thing is once a recession is announced, and the business cycle you're seeing is collapsing, it's too late. So that's why it's important to know these, right? Let's go throw up a chart right now or a graphic from Investopedia about the business cycle, okay? Because this is going to show you all the 4 different parts of this cycle. So on the flip side, a business cycle recovery begins when that recessionary vicious cycle reverses and becomes a victorious cycle. We'll call it that. Now it's moving up, right? Remember, everything that goes up must come down. But again, the cycle repeats and everything goes back up again, right? But this vicious cycle reverses and becomes this victorious cycle, with rising output triggering job gains, rising incomes, and increasing sales that feed back into a further rise in output. The recovery can persist and result in a sustained economic expansion only if it becomes self-feeding, which is ensured by this domino effect driving the diffusion of the revival across the economy. Now let's talk about measuring and dating business cycles, right? Because that's important because once you measure how severe they are and when they happen, you can pretty much get a good idea of when they're coming in the future, right? So the severity of a recession is measured by the 3 Ds, which is depth, diffusion, and duration. A recession's depth is determined by the magnitude of the peak to trough decline in the broad measures of output, employment, income, and sales. The diffusion is measured by the extent of its spread across economic activities, industries, and geographical regions. Its duration is determined by the time interval between the peak and the trough. An expansion begins at the trough or the bottom of a business cycle and continues until the next peak, while a recession starts at that peak and continues until following through. Now, the National Bureau of Economic Research, or the NBER, determines the business cycle chronology, the start and end dates of recessions and expansions for the United States. I know it's crazy. It's just this group of people that come out and go,
It started. Recession.
And then everybody freaks out. It is true though. When a recession is announced, people actually automatically that had no idea what was going on start to recess and spend less money. It's a really cool phenomenon. So you want to be ahead of this. Now, accordingly, its business cycle dating committee considers a recession to be a significant, quote unquote, decline in economic activity spread across the economy, lasting more than a few months, normally visible in real GDP, real income, employment, industrial production, and wholesale retail sales. As of the recording of this video, all of those indicators are looking bad, just to give you a little heads up on where we're headed. Now, the dating committee typically, and this isn't like, dating like you think on an app, the dating committee of this recession indicator typically determines recession start and end dates after the fact. For instance, the end of 2007, 2009 recession, it waited to make its decision until revisions in the national income and product accounts were released on July 30th and August 27th of 2010. So here you are, you're over halfway through 2010 and they say,
okay, the recession ended over a year ago.
How do you like that? So you can see the frustration in a lot of people's eyes or minds when they don't have accurate, up-to-date in information. And that's why you need to know things like this so you can tell, like right now, we are in a recession. Seriously, type 1 if you agree with that. Type 2 if you don't. But I'm telling you right now, we're in it. But I'm not going to wait for some government bureaucrat or a committee to tell me when we're in a recession. That's why I'm slowing down what I'm doing. Now, U.S. expansions have lasted longer than U.S. contractions on average. Between 1949 and 2019, the average expansion lasted about 65 months. The average recession lasted approximately 11 months. So now think about this. The old adage, bears or bulls climb up stairs, right? A bull market slowly ticks up the stairs and it takes a long time, but bears jump out of windows. Meaning that when people figure out that things are bad, everyone's heading for the exits. And that's why economic expansions last so long. Think about the roaring 20s and how long that economy expanded from like 1921, 22 up until the 28 crash, or the 29 crash, and then subsequently the Great Depression after that, okay? Now, between the 1850s and World War II, the average expansion lasted about 26 months. And the average recession about 21 months. The longest expansion was from 2009 to 2020, which lasted 128 months. And I'm gonna be honest with you, if the world wasn't shut down because of a little flu, it would have kept going. Stock prices in the business cycle, how does that play out? Well, the biggest stock price downturns tend to occur, but not always, around the business cycle downturns, right? For example, the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 took steep dives during the Great Recession. The Dow fell 51.1% and the S&P fell 56.8% between October of 2007 and March of 2009. That still is burning into my memory. I remember that like it was yesterday because I was an active investor back then. So many of you were too, and this is why it's important to know these things. There are many reasons for this, but primarily it's because businesses assume defense measures and investor confidence falls during contractionary periods. Many events occur before people in an economy are aware that they're in a contraction, but the stock market trails what's going on in the economy. So, if there is a speculation or rumors about a recession, mass layoffs, rising unemployment, decreasing output, or other indicators, businesses and investors begin to fear a recession and act accordingly. Businesses assume defensive tactics, reducing their workforces and budgeting for an environment of falling revenues because the economy is failing. Investors flee to investments known to preserve capital. Demand for expansionary investments falls and stock prices drop. It's important to remember that while stock prices tend to fall during economic contractions, the phase does not cause stock prices to fall. Fear of a recession causes them to fall. So the question is, are business cycles predictable? Generally, business cycles are not predictable. Economies are complex machines that function in a variety of ways that are intertwined in many ways. The ability to predict how they move is extremely difficult. There can be signs of changes in an economy, such as changes in inflation and production. But to predict an all-out change in the business cycle is tough but not impossible. Give you an example. We are seeing more and more companies telling their shareholders on Wall Street through their quarterly and annual reports, they're having a hard time selling goods. We're seeing the unemployment rate rise because companies that are selling less goods are laying people off. These are the business cycle right in your face. So the bottom line, let's just nail this down. The business cycle is the time it takes the economy to go through all four phases of the cycle, which are expansion, peak, contraction, and trough. Expansions are times of increasing profits for businesses and rising economic output, and are the phase the U.S. economy spends the most time in. Contractions are times of decreasing profits and lower outputs, and are the phase in which the least amount of time is spent. I hope you got something out of this, because we are seeing the business cycle turn down, and it's going to get scary in the future. And with this information, hopefully you can go forth and crush it. That being said, I'm the Economic Ninja, and I'm out.